Good day, dear students. We are starting with a new author, and that is G.K. Chesterton. You have an essay by G.K. Chesterton, and the name of the essay is On Running After One's Hat. This title itself is hilarious. It is something very humorous. So let's see what Chesterton has to say on running after a hat. Before that, you should know that Chesterton is an essayist. He is also someone who had written something more than an essay. He is a short story writer. He had written novels, and so you find him writing criminal fictional work with the Father Brown as the main character or the detective of the story. I have read a few stories with the Father Brown as the main detective, and they are just after the other. They are really very good detective stories, and Father Brown is a fictional character. It is said that he had based Father Brown on Right Reverend Monsignor John O'Connor, a parish priest in Bradford, who was involved in Chesterton's conversion to Catholicism in 1922. Chesterton had written with this fictional character almost 53 short stories. It was published between 1910 and 1936, and this character, that is Father Brown, solves mysteries and crimes using his intuition and keen understanding of human nature. Nowadays, when you read a detective story, it is not enough that you can solve the mystery by intuition and keen understanding of human nature alone. You need a lot of facts, you need a lot of evidences. So that is quite different. And in those early days, people used to enjoy the Father Brown stories. And Chesterton really had written much about the character, or this character is there, that is, Father Brown is there, quite insignificant in the story at the beginning, but you come to know that he is almost all there in the most unlikeliest of places. So we find ourselves following this character and enjoying the story much better than anything. Chesterton had also written a number of essays, one better than the other. He is not like the other essayists. That's why his essay is included in this collection. He has got a touch of humor, and he says something that we all need to have, which is a positive outlook on life. So he takes the example of running after one's hat. As you all know, being an Englishman, hat is something that you associate with the dressing of an Englishman. Almost all of them used to wear hat in one way or the other. Come winter or summer, the hat is essential to an Englishman. And hats come in all sizes and shapes. For women, it is all dressed up, and so when a wind comes, the hat just is snatched away by the wind, and one has to run after the hat. It looks hilarious to the onlookers, but the person who is running after the hat do not consider it as something comic. It is like running between the people and the vehicles, and being ridiculed by the people or being laughed at by the people. That is not something people really enjoy. But Chesterton says, why don't you take it in a hilarious mode? So he gives examples through his essay, one after the other. He gives the examples, and is remonstrating as to how to laugh at a hard situation or a situation which you find very difficult to accept or the inconveniences in life. And more than that, Chesterton is the prince of paradoxes. So that also should be considered. So, what is a paradox? A paradox is a seemingly absurd or contradictory statement or proposition which, when investigated, may prove to be well founded or true. So, at the first glance, you find that what is this man saying? How can you laugh at an inconvenient situation? How can you laugh when you are running after a hat? So that may seem to be a contradictory statement, but at the same time, when you investigate it further, it may prove to be well founded or true. Times have progressed from those years, from the 1920s, 36 on to the present situation. And we have seen and heard so many people asking us to relax and to be at ease during our most inconvenient of times. And we have been initiated into the process by the speeches and by the sermons and by the literature that was produced during these years. So we know what the issue here is, a need to think about inconvenience in an extremely positive manner. He starts telling us by telling us about his own district, that is Battersea, which is a district in London, England. And why is he taking this instance, the flooding of Battersea? Because on both sides you will find the streets, and the rains came quite inconveniently and it flooded the place. So people really did find it difficult to get through those flooded waters. So they had to use a boat. So Chesterton says that that is his own Battersea has been favored as a meeting of the waters. Battersea was already the most beautiful of human localities, and he was not there during the times of flood. But at the same time, says he would have really enjoyed being there, and he would have really been there enjoying the floods themselves. But most people find it quite inconvenient to wade through the water and to reach the places. Instead of taking it in an impossible as an impossible situation, he is asking us to imagine that this is the vision of Venice, which is the most beautiful of places in Europe, which we long to visit because of its narrow canals and, of course, the most famous gondola or the gondolier taking us in his gondola and journeying through that. If you visit Venice, you can't just miss gondola and the gondolier who will take you in his gondola. So, what is a gondola? It is a narrow boat, and it is constructed in such a manner that it can wade through the canals, as you can see in the picture. This is a picture of Venice with its gondola and the gondolier taking things and even people through these waters. On both sides, you will find the houses and all the warehouses, all the shops, and through them you will have to travel. It's like the old time road, which was the canals and the waterway that used to exist even in our Kerala. So, it is there used to be one such waterway which used to take things from one place to the other instead of the roads. So in order to go through these canals, narrow canals, you have to have a narrow boat. That was the times past. Now the roads dominate, and naturally we have the vehicles that pass through the road. So, why should we think of the road which is flooded? And naturally, it is a total inconvenience to us. We have faced not just one flood, but two in the last 2 years. So, we can see how inconvenient it is. The first, we were totally afraid and even a little bit apprehensive of the rains and the floods, especially the rising waters at the most unlikeliest of places. But even then, certain situations turned us to think positively of that. So it is in this manner he is asking us to think of the flooding of Battersea as a place like Venice, where the gondolier takes things from one place to the other, and he sees much happiness when the butcher's boat going taking meat from one place to the other through the rippling silver with the strange smoothness of the gondola, and the greengrocer who brought cabbages to the corner of the Lachmere road. He must have leaned on the road with unearthly grace of a gondolier, because these gondolas and the gondolier of Venice is so used to turning and twisting the boat in the proper direction that it is almost a part of their body. In the same manner, he is equating the situation in Battersea and is asking the people to imagine that the inconveniences are just nothing. Think of your place as the Venice and the boat that carries things from one place to the other as the gondola, instead of being inconvenienced by the water or the floods. So here he is trying to make us think of a better situation which is equivalent to the present inconvenient situation. In a way, he is a true optimist. That's why he says in the second paragraph, that the second paragraph I have taken into several sections, and it is marked as such in this section. So here you find the first part of that second paragraph. He finds a romantic view of inconveniences. At the same time, the indignant ratepayer, naturally, those who pay the tax, naturally, we are indignant when we don't have proper roads, when you don't have the roads maintained properly, and you are also paying vehicle taxes, and you are also paying income tax. So, what is the government doing with all these? So, naturally, we are indignant about these inconveniences, and naturally, we grumble and we curse, and all these really happens. But you will find that Chesterton knew that all these are indeed true. At the same time, he says, real pain, as in the case of being burnt at Smithfield or having a toothache, is a positive thing. It can be supported, but scarcely enjoyed. So these are not real pains. A toothache is a real pain. Naturally, you can't smile through a toothache. So also being burnt at Smithfield. Here, he is bringing in the historical instance of being roasted or boiled alive uh, people who were naturally branded as heretics, or people who said something against their religion. And this happened during the reign of Mary Tudor, and for almost 400 years, this kind of a punishment was in existence. So naturally, almost 400 years before this kind of a punishment existed. So being burnt at Smithfield is just agony before before the people. You are being burnt alive, and this is exactly what he is trying to tell us, because that is pain, and this pain is suffered by people who believe that they are dying for their religion. Maybe they find it very easy to accept that suffering, but at the same time, it is extremely painful. That is real pain. And he is not asking us to laugh through the pain like burning or even a toothache, but he is asking us to think of inconveniences, because inconveniences are maybe either sentimental, or it can be imaginative inconvenience. It can be either sentimental or imaginative inconvenience. So he says that people complain about having to hang about a railway station, and naturally they will start grumbling. Why is the train late? And why are we have here? And we have a lot of things to do, and still the train is not coming. But you will find that no child at the railway station will ever complain about the lateness of the train, or being waiting or having to wait in the railway station, because to him everything is of wonder and pleasure to him, because maybe it is his one chance to visit the railway station. He doesn't do it often. This is indeed a great treat to him. So he is all excited. He looks at people this side and that side. He looks at the other trains coming and going by, and he is eagerly waiting for his train journey. So naturally, the child is not in the least bit inconvenienced by the lateness of the train, nor will he complain about the railway station, or even the dirtiness, or even the crowd in the railway station, or anything. It is a great pleasure to him. And he also says they also serve who only stand and wait for the 2:15. 2:15, the train that comes at 2:15. This first part of the sentence is actually a line from Milton's sonnet on his blindness. As you are students who had studied appreciating poetry and the poem Milton's sonnet on his blindness, you will be reminded of these lines. They also serve who only stand and wait, because only people with patience will be rewarded. So it is in that sense he says that if you wait patiently, you will not be inconvenienced. You will try to think of one way or the other to fill in the time, and the time will be spent in a pleasurable mood or in a positive manner. Again, Chesterton says it is his own personal experience. Everything depends upon the emotional point of view, because you find that it is your attitude that makes it an inconvenient situation. And you can also apply the test to every one of the things talked of as the typical nuisance of daily life. In a way, he is asking to think of the typical nuisances of our daily life, and uh, think deeply, and you will come upon the situation. Why is it inconvenient to you? Or why is it a nuisance to me? Because of some emotional point of view. Other than that, there is no actual reason. While the others take it in their stride, we try to think of it as an inconvenience. So Chesterton says from his own personal experience that the inconveniences are something that is dependent on one's own emotional point of view. Again, in the third paragraph, he continues with the example. That is, it is unpleasant to run after one's hat. You can imagine a dignified Englishman wearing a tall hat and maybe his walking stick, and he is walking gently on the road. And then comes a gust of wind and takes away his hat, and so he had to run after the hat, and the people around him will be laughing at him. If it is a lady, naturally ladies will have a ribbon to tie up the hat beneath their chin so it won't just run away from them. But it is not so for a gentleman. You can't have a ribbon to tie around your chin like the ladies, as I said, like the ladies. So it is not a gentlemanly thing to do. You have to wear the hat, and the hat must fit in the proper manner on your head. That is the style of dressing for an Englishman. And dignity is something that goes with him. So when you run after your hat, you lose your dignity. So a person who had been walking in a dignified manner suddenly becomes a comic figure. So it is not because of running, but that running after one's hat that you find it unpleasant. It is totally humiliating, and it is a comic scene to others. You are a scene of comedy to others. That is not something that we enjoy. If we can give pleasure to the others by making them laugh, you should take it in your stride and not be upset about or do not should not consider this as an unpleasant situation. But Chesterton says man is really comic in nature. What about his eating habits? Sometimes you feel like laughing and making love and running after hat is not half so ridiculous as a man running after a wife. A man running after a wife seems to be a totally undignified situation, and it is hilarious also for others. This running after one's hat need not be such a thing. You can take it in your stride and make it a really enjoyable situation. So, how can you turn a a negative situation into a positive one? He says that positive attitude to running after one's hat is uh, like you can imagine it like a huntsman pursuing a wild animal. Because in England, hunting was a pastime that is restricted to the nobility. And so the other just can't go for hunting. But it is a sports that all men folk would like to enjoy. There is that group, and they all go after the wild animal, and there are the hounds to trace the wild animal, and the guided by the hounds you just run with your gun, and finally you pin the wild animal, and that is something that you really enjoy. Why not take the hunting of the hat as one such sport? So he says that it could be hat hunting. Instead of just saying running after one's hat, he says that it could be hat hunting. And why not? In future, there will be competitions like this. Very hilariously, he says that it is indeed based on humanitarianism. The dignified ladies and gentlemen will assemble, and there will be one person as referee, and he will give the warning, and then there will be the gust of wind and something like that, and naturally the hat will fly off, and these gentlemen should run after that, and the one who gets his hat first should be named the winner, and the amount collected from that can be used for some humanitarian purposes. This is exactly what the nobility used to do. They have one party or the other, and the situation is turned to the benefit of humanity. So this hat hunting one day can be turned into the sports of upper class in future. Why is it the upper class? Because they are the people who dress up properly, wearing a hat, whether it is rain or shine, they really will have the hat. So that is the code of dressing. So naturally, this can be taken to mean that hat hunting can be the sport of the upper class in future. And how to conduct the sport, he gives us in elaboration how it should be done, and how this comics thing can be turned into a hilarious pleasure for the others and also for the people who are taking part in it. Suppose it is a sport, you will enjoy it, won't you? Running is not that which you are against, but running after one's hat is that you consider as undignified. You take part in sports, you run and you win the competition. And whatever sports that is involved, it needs a lot of running. And naturally, you enjoy that. So, why don't you enjoy running after your own hat? There is nothing undignified about it. Consider it as something hilarious. So it should be sports combined with humanitarianism. You are giving pleasure to the others, and at the same time, you are enjoying the sport. So, as per the title on running after one's hat, it need not be a humiliating experience or undignified experience or inconvenience, but it should be considered as a sport combined with humanitarianism. And he says, our heart should be filled with peace and thanks, a pleasure for the crowd. Peace, because you are doing your daily exercise of running. Thanks, because finally you got the hat and you are giving a pleasure for the crowd. So it is in that sense it should be taken, and it is how the unaffected pleasure, his every gesture and bodily attitude were at that moment giving to the crowd. It is giving pleasure to the crowd that should be prominent in your mind. And you should remove all the other negative thoughts from your mind. Again, in the next paragraph, fifth paragraph, Chesterton brings this principle to every other domestic worry. He continues to speak philosophically of the things that irritate you. A small thing should not irritate you. And we'll be thinking it is very easy for him to say. When you are so busy, something just intrudes and you don't have the patience to deal with it. It just irritates you. And he says, think of the patience of the anglers. The anglers here refers to people who take fishing as a sport. They have the fishing rod with them and they have to sit by the dark pools where they will have to wait patiently without moving, without even the slightest breath, trying to woo the fish to the harp. And it is the patience that really pays. So think of the patience of anglers sitting by dark pools, and they will be rewarded by that. So, naturally, he is asking us to have the patience of the anglers, and by patiently sitting, you can just remove the irritation or that which irritates you. And if you have that kind of patience, your soul will be radiated with gratification and repose. Your soul will be radiated, filled with the radiance, with the glow, that with gratification and also repose, a kind of rest, because irritation just baffles you and makes you quite not your usual self, and you commit a sort of all sorts of mistakes. So when you cool down, when you are patient with yourself, he's not using the word cool down or anything, because these are modern words, or the words that are used to describe the situation in the 20th century. But remember, he was writing in the 19th century. So he uses the words gratification and repose. And suppose he takes the example of his friend who finds that his drawer is always jammed. He is in a hurry to take things from the drawer, and after taking it, when he tried to push it in, the drawer gets jammed. And when it gets jammed, he uses all those words which are not to be used as per the his Catholic teachings, and he starts swearing. And every day this happens. So why not turn this into a sport? For this also, he finds a sport which is really compatible. Chesterton's advice to such a friend is that he is asking his friend that it is better to struggle with the enemy. That is, imagine that you are struggling with your enemy and not trying to free the jammed draw and make it slide into its position. So he is trying to make the friend think that this is your enemy. You will have to struggle with him, push him this side and that side, and finally he will bend to your will. And tugging up a lifeboat out of sea, or roping up a fellow creature out of an alpine crevasse. So imagine you are doing something really wonderful, writing like tugging up a lifeboat out of a sea. You are saving the life of a person and the lifeboat from the sea, and you need tremendous strength to pull it from the sea and save the people from that boat. That is something rewarding. You will do anything to do that, spend all your strength, because it is a tug between life and death. So you are out to save that person and you will do that. Or else think of roping up a fellow creature out of an alpine crevice. Alps is the mountains in Europe. It stretches to almost 6 countries. For an Englishman, that is the nearest mountaineering place, and maybe they had gone to these places. And they also knew that while they are climbing the mountain, there is a possibility that the person who is with you must have fallen into a crevice. So the rope that tied you to that person will be lagging, and you will use all your strength to pull that person from that crevice, because it is life and death. It is something that you have to do. You do it without irritation or considering it as an inconvenience, because it is a life and death situation. Or again, think of a boy or a situation like your childhood. As a boy, you are engaged in a tug of war between French and English. The English and French were at loggerheads for a long time, for some time. And later, there was much treaty and there was much solving of the situation. But even then, the boys used to play this kind of a game. You are on one side, the English side, the other party. Your friend is on the French side, and you have a combat or even a tug of war between both sides, that is the French and the English, and you do it with a lot of strength, with a lot of enthusiasm. Why not take the inconveniences in exactly the same manner? Like a boy engaged in a tug of war between French and English, how much he will relish it. And Chesterton is sure that his friend from here on will be enjoying the daily inconvenience of tugging his draw, and will be using it as a daily chore to do rather than an inconvenience. Because if he thinks it of as tugging up a lifeboat out of the sea, or roping up a fellow creature out of an alpine crevice, or like like the boy that he was when he was younger, engaged in a tug of war between French and English, he is sure to enjoy the daily inconvenience. Again, he comes to the floods. He says in the sixth paragraph that the floods in London may be accepted and enjoyed poetically. Inconvenience is only one aspect, the most unimaginative and accidental aspect of a really romantic situation, because to Chesterton, though he is away from Battersea during the time of the floods. He is writing from there. He says he would have really enjoyed it, though it is an inconvenience, definitely. But this inconvenience ought to be enjoyed poetically. And it is only in one aspect, the most unimaginative and accidental aspect of a really romantic situation. This is how he describes it. This is actually a romantic situation, but because we are not we are unimaginative, and because of the accidental aspect of the reality, we try to think of it as an inconvenience. Otherwise, we would have really enjoyed the romantic nature of the situation. And I'm sure that you have gone through the situation several times in your very young life, because there is the young children wading through the water if there is a flood. Because even when we were younger, our streets used to flood during the rainy days. Not all rainy days, but occasionally, especially in June, July. And we are all dressed up, wearing long skirts, and there is the flood. And flood means the rising waters. We have to wade through that in order to reach the bus stop. Though you find that it is inconvenient, you don't really feel angry at the situation. On the other hand, you really enjoy it. And once you reach the school, you can really narrate the situation to your friends who were not fortunate enough to have flood in their street. And you can also add more to that flood. You can say that a fish was going this side and that side, and naturally this is much more enjoyable to the listeners, and you also feel quite proud of that fact. So this is never an inconvenience for us, and it had never been an inconvenience for us. And even now also, I think children would love to wade through the waters. Only thing is that parents will not allow them to do that. But this is not an inconvenience, it is a really romantic situation. So he says in the next paragraph, an adventure is only an inconvenience rightly considered. An inconvenience is only an adventure wrongly considered, because the flood at Battersea have increased their witchery and wonder, because its witchery means witchcraft, which really had the place being flooded. But at the same time, it is a wonder for the others who looks upon it as something to be enjoyed. Inconveniences are many, because you can't go to a shop, you can't walk on the streets, you have to wade through the water, you get wet, your footwear also get wet, and naturally this is not something that you really enjoy. A lot of inconvenience. You will have to change your dress, clean it, and again next day you will have to wade through the water. That is too much. But even then, it is something that uh, Chesterton says he would really enjoy. He would like to stand at a spot and watch people from the area, and watch them wading through the water. And we have had several hilarious situations, people losing their balances and trying to fall or appear to fall into the water and getting up. And if it is indeed children, naturally they'll be enjoying. They won't be bothering about even the wet clothes or even the wet footwear like the elders. So the floods at Battersea, he says, have increased their witchery and wonder, and had made it a place like fairyland. So how can one think of such inconvenience a fairyland? Only Chesterton can, because he is coming to us through these paces and telling us that this is indeed how to look on life. Again, he says, wine is good with everything except water. That is what a priest said. And the corollary to that is, water is good with everything except wine. in whatever way it is said, it is the same. So you find that this is the whatever way which is in which it is said, the gist of it is the same. Likewise, an inconvenience is only an adventure wrongly considered. The flood and again he says, an adventure is only an inconvenience rightly considered. Isn't it so? So from the very beginning, he continues to initiate us through the inconveniences and trying to make us see that inconvenience is just an attitude of your mind or thought, and it is that which is to be changed, not exactly the situation. And it is in this manner that he continues writing the about the people and also the about life. And he concludes by saying that there are a lot of situations where inconveniences of life, when you come across life, you will find a lot of inconveniences, and the right attitude which one has to develop towards these inconveniences, it is that which makes you face your life and also the world. And when you think of the title of the essay, that is on running after one's hat, you feel that it is a hilarious essay. It is, in one sense, because you can you imagine a very dignified person running after, wearing suit and coat and everything, he is ready to go for his job, and there is a walking stick also. So with that you have to walk in a dignified manner. So then the wind comes all on a sudden. Usually you enjoy a wind, but this wind was a bit strong and it took away the hat with it. So you have to run after the hat, because you can't ever think of facing the crowd or even the place where you're working, reaching there without a hat. So naturally you run after the hat. Sometimes this hat will run, the wind will take the hat to a branch of a tree, and then he'll have to use a walking stick, or somebody else will have to shake the plant, and things like that really do happen. And all these can be taken in a very hilarious manner, or you can be quite angry about that situation and consider it an inconvenience and make your own life insufferable, because it is you who are to make the right attitude towards life, and it is that attitude which you'll have to develop and face your inconveniences. If you do that, it will not be an inconvenience. The word inconvenience will be removed from your life. You will be taking it as something that is to do and something pleasurable. If you imagine that you are in a totally different situation, and like the man trying to correct the jammed draw, you can imagine that you are fighting an enemy and you are trying to make the best use of the situation, and you have overpowered the enemy. It is that which makes the jammed draw and the adventure with it hilarious, and at the same time enjoyable, and you can really not get irritated by that. So, this attitude to life that G.K. Chesterton preaches is something that we can follow. He also says that it is something, either way said, it is your life. Like the wine is good with everything except water. Water is good with everything except wine, is also a corollary which is applicable to your life also. It is in this sense that he says these inconveniences of life and the right attitude will help you to pull through difficult situations, and you will be sailing through it rather than drudging through it. Chesterton altogether uses paradox, as I told you earlier or at the beginning, and you will also find that he is coming to a philosophy of life, which is indeed the proper manner of a life. And he uses simple words. And from here and there, from the life that he led, he uses the term of, he mentions his place, Battersea. He also mentions the place called Smithfield, bringing up a reference from history. And he says that there were dire situations which people had to overcome. So, why not accept this little bit of inconvenience and turn it into something for your advantage? It is that philosophy that Chesterton speaks through or teaches through the essay on running after one's hat. I hope you will read the essay properly and try to go through these explanations and also the questions towards the end of the lesson. We'll discuss the questions in the next class. Thank you.